My name is Angela Collins. I'm 26 years old. For 3 years, my family called me a professional victim, while my sister Sloane built a $1 million wellness brand on the back of clean living and perfection. They mocked my mysterious flares over Sunday brunch, called my fatigue a character flaw, and eventually cut off my medical fund to teach me a lesson. But at my parents' 30th anniversary gala, in front of the city's elite, a man I hadn't seen in months walked into the ballroom with a file that would expose the dark rot at the center of my sister's empire. What they didn't know, my doctor hadn't given up on me. He had been running a secret study, and the results were about to turn the Collins family legacy into a crime scene. The Collins family was wellness royalty, the kind of people who owned organic juice empires and spoke at longevity summits. My father, Julian Collins, ran Vitality North, a health supplement conglomerate my grandfather started in a garage in 1982. By 2026, the brand was a household name. I was diagnosed with a rare autoimmune condition at 23. The symptoms were invisible: nerves that felt like they were on fire, joints that stiffened without warning, and a fog that turned my sharpest thoughts into static. My parents' response wasn't empathy, it was a PR crisis. They didn't see a sick daughter. They saw a broken product that threatened the family brand. To them, my illness was an embarrassment that needed to be hidden, or better yet, debunked. The invisible war didn't start with a bang, it started with a tremor. I was 23, a marathon runner with a law degree in progress, when the world began to tilt. It started as a phantom electric shock in my spine, then a crushing fatigue that made my limbs feel like they were carved from lead. By 2024, Vitality North was celebrating a record-breaking fiscal year, but I was struggling to lift a coffee mug. My parents' reaction was immediate and clinical. Julian and Elena Collins didn't deal in mystery, they dealt in results. If a supplement didn't perform, you pulled it from the shelf. When my tests came back inconclusive, they didn't see a medical puzzle, they saw a defective product. "Angela, everyone gets tired," my father would say, his eyes never leaving his Bloomberg terminal. "It's a lack of discipline. You're letting the stress win." That was the opening Sloane needed. My sister didn't just have a following, she had a congregation. To her 2 million subscribers, she was the high priestess of the glow up. She was all green juice and morning affirmations, her skin perpetually sun-kissed and her teeth blindingly white. While I was curled in a darkened room with a migraine that felt like a hot needle, Sloane was in the hallway, filming a Get Ready With Me video. "It's so hard having a sibling who weaponizes their mood," she'd whisper into a ring light, her voice a practiced cocktail of pity and poise. "Sometimes, people use illness as a way to steal the spotlight when they can't earn it themselves. It's a toxic cycle, but I'm choosing to lead with love." She didn't name me, but she didn't have to. The comments sections were bloodbaths. Is she talking about her sister? Poor Sloane, carrying the family while the other one fakes it. I remember a specific dinner in 2025. I had managed to make it to the table, my hands shaking so violently I had to hide them under my napkin. Sloane was glowing, recounting her latest partnership with a luxury yoga brand. When I dropped my fork, the clatter echoing like a gunshot, my mother's face twisted in disgust. "Angela, please," she hissed. "Can we have one meal without a performance?" "It's okay, Mom," Sloane said, placing a comforting hand on my mother's arm while looking directly at me with a smirk that never reached her eyes. Some people just aren't built for the marathon of life. They'd rather take a shortcut through the hospital. She began posting wellness checks on her story, pitying photos of my closed bedroom door with captions about the burden of enablers. She wasn't just my sister, she was a master architect, building a digital cage around me. Every time I tried to speak, her followers drowned me out. I was the jealous sister, the malingerer, the shadow in the house of light. I was drowning in plain sight, and Sloane was the one holding my head underwater, all while the cameras rolled. The first crack in the foundation appeared on a rainy Tuesday in April 2024. I was hunched over the kitchen island, my vision blurring as I tried to make sense of a balance notification from my medical insurance. The numbers didn't add up. Vitality North had provided a top-tier executive health plan for family members, yet my claims for the specialist in Boston were being flagged as denied by policyholder. I waited until the house was quiet, until the hum of Sloane's ring light died down and my parents had left for a charity gala. My heart hammered against my ribs, a jagged, irregular rhythm that made my breath catch. I crept into Sloane's home office, a room that smelled perpetually of expensive Palo Santo and staged perfection. Hidden behind a stack of wellness journal prototypes in her bottom drawer was a thick, cream-colored accordion file. I expected to find tax documents or brand contracts. Instead, I found my life dismantled. There were dozens of unopened envelopes from the Mayo Clinic and Dr. Thorne's office, their seals broken with surgical precision. My breath hitched as I pulled out a letter dated 3 months prior. It was a formal diagnosis, neuromuscular stasis syndrome, a rare but treatable autoimmune condition. Attached to it was a forged response, written on my father's stationery, but signed with a shaky imitation of my handwriting. It stated that I was refusing further testing and admitted the symptoms were psychosomatic. Sloane hadn't just been hiding the truth, she had been ghostwriting my failure. Further down the stack, I found something even more chilling, a series of printed emails between Sloane and an offshore pharmacy. She had been ordering high-dose diuretics and thyroid suppressants, medications that, when crushed into the daily Vitality smoothies she made for me every morning, would mimic the exact symptoms of a heart arrhythmia and chronic exhaustion. She wasn't just watching me wither, she was the gardener. I sat on the floor of her office, the cold marble seeping into my bones. For years, I had questioned my own sanity. I had looked at my trembling hands and wondered if my mind was truly broken. My parents' disappointment, the public mockery, the lazy label, it had all been a carefully curated script. Sloane needed a foil to her perfection, a sickly sister to highlight her own vibrant health, and she was willing to poison my blood to keep the contrast sharp. I heard the front door chime, the electronic trill of my parents returning. I shoved the files back into the drawer, my mind racing with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The brain fog hadn't been my illness, it had been her handiwork. Sloane thought she was the only one who knew how to manage a brand. But as I slipped back into the shadows of the hallway, I realized she had made a fatal mistake. She assumed I was too weak to read the fine print. The 30th Anniversary Gala of Vitality North was held at the Glass House, a shimmering architectural marvel overlooking the Hudson River. To the 500 guests in attendance, the Collins family was the blueprint for American health. My father, Julian, stood at the center of a circle of venture capitalists, his posture as rigid as the high-yield stocks he traded. Beside him, Sloane was a vision in molten gold, her silk slip dress clinging to a frame she credited to fasting and fortitude. I stood in the shadows of a topiary, my borrowed black dress hanging off my collarbones. My heart wasn't just racing, it was skipping, a jagged staccato rhythm fueled by the wellness tonic Sloane had insisted I drink before we left the house. My hands were shoved deep into my pockets, clutching the photocopied pages I'd stolen from her office, the proof that my body was being sabotaged by the woman currently laughing at a senator's joke. "Ladies and gentlemen," my father's voice boomed, cutting through the jazz quartet. He stepped onto the low dais, motioning for my mother and Sloane to join him. I remained in the back, a ghost at the feast. 30 years ago, we started with a mission to eliminate weakness from the human spirit. Tonight, we celebrate that journey. He paused, his gaze sweeping the room until it landed on me with the cold weight of a gavel. But leadership requires hard choices. We've realized that enabling weakness is just as dangerous as the weakness itself. He cleared his throat. As of tonight, the Collins Family Trust will no longer provide for those who refuse to provide for themselves. We are transitioning our medical philanthropy inward. Angela, we love you, but the bank of imaginary ailments is closed. It's time you join the real world. A ripple of uncomfortable murmurs crossed the room. Sloane stepped forward, taking the microphone with practiced grace. A single, performative tear glistened in the corner of her eye. "It's my fault, really," Sloane whispered, her voice amplified for every socialite and journalist in the room. "I shielded her for too long. I let my sister's illness become her identity. But I'm here to offer a hand up, not a handout. Angela, I've created a new position for you at my brand. You'll be my head of logistics. It's low stress, consistent, and most importantly, it will give you a reason to get out of bed." She looked at me, the public saint, offering a lifeline to the lazy failure. The cameras flashed, capturing her benevolence and my humiliation. My mother nodded, her face a mask of relieved disappointment. "Well, Angela?" Sloane's smile was a razor. "Do you accept the help, or are you going to stay a victim forever?" I opened my mouth to speak, but the room began to spin. The diuretics were peaking. Just as I felt my knees buckle, the heavy oak doors at the entrance swung open. "She won't be taking the position," a calm, authoritative voice echoed through the ballroom. "Because she's being admitted to the ICU. And you, Sloane, are the reason why." The silence that followed Dr. Aris Thorne's entrance was absolute, broken only by the rhythmic click of his Oxfords on the marble floor. He didn't look like a savior, he looked like a scientist. In his charcoal suit, clutching a leather tablet, he bypassed the bar and the socialites, walking straight to the dais. Sloane's grip on the microphone tightened, her knuckles turning the same ghostly white as her teeth. "Dr. Thorne? This is a private family event. Angela's episodes aren't a matter for the public." "You're right," Dr. Thorne said, his voice cutting through the room with the precision of a scalpel. He didn't look at her. He looked at my father. "They're a matter for the district attorney. But first, they're a matter of science." He tapped his tablet, and the massive projector screen behind the stage, previously displaying a montage of Sloane's vitality retreats, flickered. A complex chemical graph replaced her smiling face. "For 6 months, Angela has been part of a blind study at my clinic," Thorne continued, ignoring the gasps from the crowd. "We provided her with what she believed were her standard supplements. But we also monitored her blood levels remotely via a subcutaneous chip. Julian, your daughter doesn't have a lack of discipline. She has neuromuscular stasis syndrome. A treatable condition," my mother whispered, her face draining of color. "Extremely treatable," Thorne countered. "Except for one variable. Every time Angela's levels began to stabilize, we saw a massive spike in unprescribed diuretics and synthetic thyroid suppressants, chemicals that mimic the exact symptoms of a heart attack." He turned to Sloane, who was frozen like a statue in gold leaf. "We traced the chemical signature of the additives. They weren't from a pharmacy. They were from the proprietary glow blend produced in your private lab, Sloane. The one you've been hand-mixing for your sister every morning." The room erupted. 100 cell phones rose in unison, the flashing lights now capturing Sloane's crumbling mask instead of her benevolence. My father stepped toward the screen, staring at the toxicology report that proved his perfect daughter was a poisoner. "I have the affidavits from the lab technicians," Thorne said, stepping toward me as I swayed. He caught my arm, his grip steady and warm. "And I have the security footage of Sloane intercepting the Mayo Clinic files from your mailbox. Angela isn't a victim of her body. She's a victim of a sociopath who needed a foil for her brand." Sloane opened her mouth to speak, to spin, to lie, but the audio of her private wellness check videos began to play over the speakers, followed by a recording Thorne had captured during a telehealth call where Sloane could be heard in the background mocking my dying act. "Dad, he's lying. He's obsessed with her." Sloane screamed, but her voice was thin and shrill, stripped of its influencer polish. My father didn't look at her. He looked at me, his eyes wide with a horrific, belated realization. But it was too late. Dr. Thorne was already signaling the EMTs waiting at the door. The glass house felt less like a ballroom and more like a crime scene as the EMTs guided me toward the exit. I didn't look back at Sloane, whose gold dress now looked like tarnished armor as she screamed at the disinterested lenses of a dozen paparazzi. I didn't look at my father, who stood frozen, finally seeing the defective product for what I actually was, the only person in the room with a soul. 6 months later, the world looked entirely different. The Vitality North Empire didn't survive the scandal. You can't sell longevity when your brand's ambassador is caught poisoning her own blood. My father resigned within weeks, the board of directors scrubbing the Collins name from every building and supplement bottle in a desperate attempt at damage control. Sloane's glow-up kingdom vanished even faster. Her followers didn't just leave, they turned into a digital lynch mob. She's currently tied up in a 3-front legal battle: aggravated assault, medical fraud, and a class action lawsuit from fans who realized her clean living was built on a foundation of chemical sabotage. I moved into a small, sun-drenched apartment in a quiet corner of the city, far from the polished marble and Palo Santo of my youth. With the correct treatment for neuromuscular stasis syndrome, the invisible war finally ended. The fire in my nerves went out. The fog lifted. For the first time in 3 years, I woke up and my body felt like an ally instead of an enemy. My relationship with my parents is complicated. My mother visits on Tuesdays. We sit in a park, and she spends most of the time crying, trying to apologize for the 3 years she spent calling me a liar. I haven't forgiven her yet, but I let her buy the coffee. My father sends emails, brief, awkward updates about the liquidation of the family estate. He still doesn't know how to be a father, but he's finally stopped trying to be a CEO. I didn't take Sloane's job offer, but I did take her audience. I started a small nonprofit called The Visible Truth, dedicated to helping patients with invisible illnesses navigate medical gaslighting. I don't use ring lights or filtered scripts. I just tell the truth. Last week, I ran my first mile since 2023. As my feet hit the pavement, I realized that Sloane had been right about one thing: life is a marathon. But she was wrong about who was built for it. She was the sprinter, fueled by the adrenaline of the spotlight and the high of the lie. I was the one who survived the long, dark miles of the invisible war. I stopped seeking approval from people who were blind to my worth, and in doing so, I finally learned to see myself. My name is Angela Collins. I am healthy, I am heard, and for the first time in my life, I am finally, truly awake. This concludes the story of the diagnosis of truth.